In July of 1991, police officers entered a filthy apartment in Milwaukee. They found a man covered in blood, leading them to a bedroom. They opened the closet. They weren't prepared for what was inside. What they discovered would expose the most depraved mind in American criminal history. A man who wasn't just a killer, but a collector. A man named Jeffrey Dahmer. And this is the story of how the monster next door nearly got away with it all. To understand the horror, you have to understand the illusion. To his classmates in Bath, Ohio, Jeff Dahmer was the quiet kid who made jokes in class. To his father, he was a science-obsessed son fascinated with animal bones. But on June 18, 1978, just weeks after graduation, the illusion shattered. Stephen Hicks was 18. He accepted a ride home from a friendly stranger. When Hicks tried to leave Jeff's house, Dahmer struck him with a dumbbell. When Stephen didn't die immediately, Jeff finished the job. While his father was away, Jeff dismembered the body in the family home, scattering the remains in the woods behind the house. The police were called to the area. They spoke to a cooperative young man named Jeffrey. But because there was no missing persons report filed for a hitchhiker no one was looking for, the case went cold. For 9 years, the monster was free to learn his craft. By 1987, the curiosity had become compulsion. Dahmer moved to Milwaukee, working at a chocolate factory. But his apartment was no longer a home, it was a laboratory. On September 15th, he met Tuomi at a bar. They went to a hotel room. The next morning, Dahmer woke up to find Tuomi dead on the bed. Dahmer later claimed he didn't remember the murder, but the panic didn't last. He bought a large suitcase, transported the body back to his grandmother's house, and performed his first full dismemberment. It was here that the ritual began, not just killing, but preserving. He began experimenting with chemicals, bleach, formaldehyde, trying to create zombies, living beings who would never leave him. He drilled holes into the skulls of his victims while they were still alive, pouring acid into their brains. He wanted obedience. When the experiments failed, the murder count escalated. 1 a month, then more. By May 1991, Dahmer was in a frenzy. But then came the mistake that should have ended it all. The twist that turned this case from a tragedy into a scandal. On May 27th, 14-year-old Konerak Sinthasomphone was drugged. Confused and bleeding from his rectum, he escaped Dahmer's apartment and ran into the street, naked and crying. 2 women saw the boy. They called 911. They begged for help. When police arrived, they found a disoriented child. And then Jeff Dahmer appeared. Calm, polite, charming, he told the officers a lie, that the boy was his 19-year-old lover, that they had a fight, and that he was drunk. The officers did not run a background check. They did not notice the smell of decay emanating from the apartment. They laughed with Dahmer. They escorted the bleeding, drugged child back into the killer's hands. Within hours, Konerak Sinthasomphone was dead. The police left him to die. This wasn't just a failure of justice, it was an invitation for the monster to continue. Over the next 2 months, the killing accelerated. Dahmer's apartment at 925 North 25th Street became a charnel house. He killed 3 more men. Neighbors complained of the smell, of strange sounds, of the constant noise of a saw running at 2 a.m. But no one looked closely enough, because Jeff was just the quiet guy who gave them free beer. Inside his apartment, Dahmer kept a 57-gallon drum filled with acid. He dissolved the bodies of his victims in that drum, reducing men to sludge. In his refrigerator, he kept a severed head. In the freezer, hearts and biceps which he intended to eat to become one with them. He had an altar of skulls. He had Polaroids of his victims in various states of dismemberment. He was curating a museum of death, hidden behind a beaded curtain in the heart of a bustling American city. On July 22, 1991, Tracy Edwards was the target. He lured him to the apartment with the promise of money for photos. He showed Edwards a knife and a handcuff, putting one cuff on Edwards' wrist. But Edwards was different. He fought. He lied to Dahmer to get him to lower his guard. When Dahmer went to the bedroom, Edwards fled. He flagged down a police cruiser. He told the officers the man had tried to kill him. The officers went back with Edwards. Dahmer tried to use his charm again. He insisted it was a misunderstanding, but this time the officers noticed the smell. They noticed the handcuffs on the bed. They pushed Dahmer aside. When they opened the refrigerator, they found a freshly severed human head. When they searched the apartment, they found 7 skulls, 2 hearts in the freezer, and the blue barrel filled with 3 torsos. Jeffrey Dahmer finally looked at the officers and whispered, "I'm the one you want. I did this. I did all of it." The world expected a circus. They got a paradox. Dahmer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution presented 15 murders. The defense presented a broken man. But the jury saw through the act. They found him sane. They found him guilty. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, over 900 years in prison. But in a twist of cosmic irony, the justice system that failed his victims was not the end of his story. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver. The monster who felt no remorse for the families he destroyed died just 2 years into his sentence. He escaped the justice he deserved. But here is the truth we cannot look away from. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is not about the killer. It is about the 17 lives he took. It is about the 17 families who are still waiting for the world to remember their sons, not just the monster who ended them. It is about the system that handed a child back to his murderer. It is a warning that the quiet neighbor, the normal face, can hide a reality we refuse to see. We consume true crime for the suspense, for the shock, but we must watch it to remember. Remember their names: Konerak, Stephen, Anthony, Errol, Eddie, Tony, Richard, David, Curtis, Ernest, Oliver, Joseph, Edward, Billy, Thomas, Matt, Jeremiah. The system failed them. Let's not fail them again by forgetting. If you want to understand the depths of human depravity, you have to look beyond the headlines. Dive deeper, learn the signs. Watch the full timeline of the investigation breakdown linked here. But more importantly, look closer at the world around you, because monsters aren't born in fiction. They're hidden in plain sight. They called him the Milwaukee Monster, but monsters are a distraction. The horror isn't that he existed. The horror is that for so long, no one wanted to see him.